Welcome to our talk show. South Korean economy is currently losing its vitality. Growth rate is plummeting, and people are losing confidence in their life, in the economy, and in their future. How to restore the vitality and instill the vitality in the economy is a crucial issue not only for South Korea, but for all society in the world. There is a man who proclaims confidently that the solution to this problem is larger capitalism and stronger capitalism. He's the author of the book, The Power of Capitalism, and I am happy to have Dr. Rainer Zimmerman with me today. Rainer, welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Would you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I'm a historian and sociologist, but I did a lot of different things in my life. I had my own company for 15 years, and I'm a real estate investor as well. But 3 years ago, I sold my company, and now I'm going to do this, what I like, writing books, and especially to spread the message all over the world why capitalism is not the problem, but it's the solution. I'm everywhere. I've been in the United States, in UK, in Europe, everywhere. And I'm very happy to be now in South Korea because one of the chapters in my book is about Korea.
So what prompted you to write this book?
Yes, when I started to write the book, a lot of people asked me with some doubts, whether is it necessary to write a book that capitalism is the better system? Doesn't everyone know it since the early years when socialism broke down at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s? Is there any news about capitalism is better? But now, 2 years later, you see all over the world. For example, look at the United States. We have there Bernie Sanders and the Democrats, who some of them want 70% taxes, some 77 wealth tax and all this, and they call themselves socialists. And in January, I was in Washington, the Students of Liberty, and it was very interesting. There was a poll. 53% of young Americans embrace socialism instead of capitalism. I think 5 years ago, no one could imagine that something happens like this, and we have similar developments in UK and in Germany, and as I heard here as well in South Korea. And so for me it was very important to inform people, to give them some facts if I compare history of socialism and history of capitalism. Facts instead of ideology.
So in your definition, what is capitalism and what is socialism?
To be honest, pure socialism and pure capitalism is nowhere in the world. In reality, we have always a mixture. I compare it with a test tube. You have there market and state. And I look what happens if you give more market or more state in the test tube. You know, capitalism is an economy with a free enterprise where the consumer and where the entrepreneur make the decision what to produce in what quantities. And in socialism, the state and the planning authorities, they make the decision what to produce. But in reality, we have always a mixture. Even in North Korea, I heard we have a little bit private property and market. And in capitalist states, we have a lot of socialism. And for me, the important question is, what will happen if you change something, if you have more or less state and more or less market? And this is what I want to show in my book.
So why more capitalism? Why is it the solution to the problem?
For me, it's very important. There's no theory. This is not a theoretical approach that I have. I'm an historian, and I look very easy what worked and what not. Yes, and for example, I give you one example that is very important for me, and this is the first chapter of my book. Look, 30 or 40 years ago in China, we had 88% of people living in extreme poverty. And at this time, there was, I think, nearly 100% state. And then what did they do with Deng Xiaoping? Capitalist reforms. He started less state, more market, more private property. And what was the result? Today, according to official data of the World Bank, the rate of extreme poverty was reduced from 88% to 1%. This is what capitalism can do. Sure, China is not pure capitalist state today. But the success, their success story has only one reason: more capitalism. And if you look about what happened in the last 30 years all over the world, 1 billion people came out of extreme poverty. The reason? Capitalism, globalization.
So empirical evidences suggest that capitalism exterminated poverty and it triumphed in the 20th century. But even in the US, socialism is still favorable, especially among millennials. The idea of socialism. Why do you think is the case?
It's a very important question, and I have not only one answer, but I have more answers. Maybe let's start with one thing. There's a wrong interpretation of the financial crisis that happened in 2008. Yes, if you hear people about the causes of the financial crisis, they will tell you it was about too much liberalization, too much capitalism, too much market. And I prove in one chapter of my book that this is a totally wrong interpretation. The contrary is true. The reason was too much intervention by federal central bank, yes, and by the state, and I have a whole chapter about this. But this is the first reason: wrong interpretation of financial crisis. People believe it. People believe this was a crisis of capitalism, but it isn't true. Another reason is you have this influence of leftist ideologists all over the universities and in the media. You have it in the United States, you have it in Europe, and I think here it's similar. It started all in the universities, and now they educate young people and they tell them, they don't tell them anything about the history of socialism. For example, when I had my lectures and I asked young people who had ever heard about the greatest socialist experiment in history. It was at the end of the 50s in China. It was called the Great Leap Forward, and that 45 million people died there. Who ever heard about it? No one. No one heard about it. They don't have the facts, and I will want to give them the facts, especially for young people, because in university and in school, they don't tell them about it. They tell them about the flaws of capitalism, and then they do one thing, and this is a big mistake. They don't compare real existing capitalism with real existing socialism, but they compare something they have in their mind, a construction, utopia, an idea, with reality. And this is not fair. I give an example. If I would compare, are you married, or you have a girlfriend maybe, or?
Maybe a girlfriend. Yeah.
Maybe you're a girl. Okay. And if you would compare your relationship with maybe a romantic love story in a movie or in a book where everything is perfect, yes? I think it would be not fair. I think you should compare your real relationship with other relationships. But what socialists do is exactly the same thing. They have the perfect society where everything is perfect, and then they look what's here, and you can only lose if you compare this. But it is not a fair way to compare things.
There are people who say that socialism didn't work in reality, but in theory it was perfect. But you say that in theory it was wrong in the first place, right?
Yes, first think about one thing. In the last 100 years, there were more than 24 socialist experiments all over the world. They tried it in every way you can try it.
So where did Karl Marx get wrong in theory?
There are a lot of things where it gets wrong in theory, but first let me explain one thing. They tried it in so many times, yes? In every way you can try it. In the Soviet Union in a different way than in China. In North Korea in a different way than in Cuba. The last time it was in Venezuela. And they tried, and all times it failed. And I give you a comparison. Imagine a housewife bakes a cake, yes? And everyone from her guests get sick eating the cake, has to vomit maybe. The next time she bakes the cake with a little bit modification, so yes, but the same recipe. Result the same, people get sick, yes, they vomit, yes, and then they does the same thing 24 times. the same cake, same or a little bit different recipe, every time the same result.
Different package a little
guest
bit.
will vomit, yes? And what would you say? I think no housewife all over the world would be so stupid to do this. But this is exactly what socialists do, to do always the same thing and expect other results. You know, the Albert Einstein told someone sometime, if you do everything the same things and expecting other results, it's another word for being insane. Yes, and so they will tell us the theory of Karl Marx was good, but only in practice. No one understood it. But I think, what is this, a theory that no one can understand in 100 years? And always, what happens always? If they try it the next time, the last time it was in Venezuela, and they were so enthusiastic about socialism in 21st century, remember 20 years ago, intellectuals all over the world, leftist politicians, Venezuela, it was so great for them. And now you see, it failed again with inflation rate 1 million% now. With 3 to 4 million people, this is more than 10% of the people in Venezuela refugees. So, and then they have a trick. They tell you, oh, no, sorry, it was not real socialism. It was not socialism, but next time it will be better. And this is the same story they tell you since 100 years now.
You say that intellectuals gave rise to socialism. Why do you think intellectuals cherish the idea of socialism?
Yes, there are two answers. The first answer, what do intellectuals do usually? They form theories, and this is their daily work, theories. And so they like something like construction of theory, and this is socialism. Capitalism is something completely different. It's not any kind of theory, and this is one reason. But there's another reason. It's their value system. Look, for example, I'm an intellectual by myself, and I come from my parents are too. And in this intellectual world, these people have the highest rank, read most books, or have a lot of
explicit knowledge, right?
Yes, you call it explicit book knowledge, explicit knowledge, or who have 2 doctorate degree like I have. Yes, these are people high. But in real economic life, people don't care about how many doctorate degree and how many books you have, but what do you do for the consumers, yes? And what you earn, it doesn't depend on what do we think, how clever you are about your book wisdom. And for the intellectuals, it seems unfair that maybe their school neighbor who was not so intelligent like they see it, now earns more money, has better house, better car, and the worst thing, his wife is prettier as well as his. And so this is envy then, and this is one reason, because he don't understand the world. It's a different value system.
So if it comes from envy and resentment, it's sort of a human nature, envy. How can capitalism combat that human nature? Because intellectuals have envy, but also people have envy, and it spreads like a fire. How can we fight socialism?
I think you cannot do anything against envy. Envy is a real fact since everywhere in the world, and there are people, but there are differences. I had conducted an international poll last year in 4 countries, the United States, UK, France, and Germany, about social envy. We compared it. And for example, French people are most envious, yes, and in UK it was less envious. So there are differences. But to your question, what should we do? First, look at me. I love capitalism. Be more offensive, not defensive, not, yeah, I know it's not the best of all, but maybe it's a little bit better. No, say, capitalism, it's great because we did so much against poverty in the world. And the big problem is that the capitalists, the entrepreneurs, they don't do anything to defend the system. They are always defensive to socialist ideology. I don't know how it is here in South Korea. in Germany, if you look at talk show and you have there one maybe entrepreneur sitting and there one from leftists, yes? The entrepreneur is always, oh yeah, I'm not so, I'm more near to you and yes, this way. And the leftist, always defensive, yes, you are right in this way, only we want all the same. But the socialists are always this way, you know, attack, 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 yes? And this is what we should learn from the leftists because they were successful in their things that they do.
So when you describe capitalism, you mention spontaneity and organic, and when you describe socialism, social construct and design.
Yes.
So why is spontaneity better than social construct or design?
Because it works better. This is always my answer, you know. I don't like to discuss about any theory. Even you don't have to understand why it works or not. If you see in 100 years that the one thing works better, sure, you can't give theoretical answers, but they were given 100 years ago. For example, Ludwig von Mises, he wrote a book in 1922, and he gave all these answers why socialism can't work. But today, I think if you discuss with socialists, don't discuss about any theory. If someone wanted to discuss for me on the theoretical, this is the field they like to have, to discuss on theory. I discuss on facts. I ask them, please show me any place in the world, now or in history, where this, what you are telling me, worked. And if you if you're not able to show me only one example, then I tell you it's wrong. Don't tell me about any theory and why this and why that. You know, I'm a historian. I look what worked and what not. And then you have to draw your own conclusion about it.
Mm-hmm. When policymakers promote socialism, they always give an example of Scandinavian model. But in your book, you say that it's already a history, the Scandinavian model. So would you describe, explain
absolutely.
that? Mm-hmm.
This is what, for example, Bernie Sanders tells them. American people who don't know so much about Scandinavian history, and if they ask them what is socialism, sure, they don't tell them we want to have it like in North Korea or like in Venezuela. Everyone would say you're stupid, or in the former Soviet Union. They tell them about something they don't know anything about. It's about Sweden, and you're right, I have one chapter about Sweden, and it's true. There was a kind of what they call democratic socialism, not only in Sweden, but as well in the UK. It was in the 70s, and it was a total disaster, like everywhere in the world. I give some funny example. For example, there was this author for books for children, Astrid Lindgren, very famous author. She was leftist by herself, but then she calculated how much taxes she had to pay, and it was 102%. And she wrote an article in an important Swedish newspaper, like a fairy tale about taxes. And with this 102%, and first I said, it's wrong, you calculated wrong. But in the end, even there, the socialists had to agree, yes, it was correctly calculated, it was 102%. And this is only one example how crazy it was. But then they changed it, everything. And the people who will tell you that it's socialism today, it's wrong. In some, they have higher taxes than in other states, but in other ways, they're absolutely not socialist. And even if you look about taxes, what a lot of people don't know, for example, I don't know how it is here in South Korea, but in Sweden, they have, for example, no inheritance tax, and they have no wealth tax. I don't know how it is here. I think you have inheritance.
It is very high in Korea, about 50%.
Inheritance tax, yes. And I think you have a kind of wealth tax as well, yes. And you don't have it here. And if it is socialism, okay, I praise socialism, yes. Then start to abolish as first thing inheritance tax, yes. Stop wealth tax, and then you have this, call it socialism if you like it, but it is not socialism. It's wrong.
Many times intellectuals accuse entrepreneurs for their immorality in acquiring property. And you describe in your book that it comes from their moral high ground. Why do you think intellectuals have moral high ground?
Yes, a very good question. I think the reason is this. if you are not successful in financial way or economical way, you have to find an explanation why it is so. And then if you tell, okay, the other one who has more money maybe, first he had maybe only luck, or maybe he has his money only because he's very immorality and did always bad things, yes? If you can this people, you can prove that you're not successful, it's a proof for having high moral standards. You know, this is crazy. It's one form of envy. What I'm talking about.
My last question is: how can we better promote capitalism? How can we make it more attractive?
Yes, first, if everyone who looks this video is going to buy the book, but not one copy, but 10 copies. Yes, and yes. 10 copies at least, and to give it to all your friends. I'm not joking about it. I did it myself with other books. Yes, I bought a lot of books because it started all with this theory, and it started all the success of this leftist people with what? With books, with theory, with media, things like you do, things like I do. And if we want to turn around, it's not from one day to the other. We have to do the same thing.
Offensive marketing approach, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So The Power of Capitalism by Rainer Zittelmann. Rainer, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.